The first thing I wanted to ask you was, have you ever been a time in your life where you've just been desperate for water? You've been panting for water. And I was thinking about Haiti this week. So, of course, I remembered my trips to Haiti where you get desperate for water. I, in fact, remembered something from the first day of work, or my second trip down there. And we were down there building homes out of the rubble from the earthquake and everything. And so we'd get to the work site. And Haiti, it was March, but it was sunny, nice 95-degree day, nice and humid down there. And we'd be out working. And in Haiti, they don't have a lot of the equipment to move stuff around for construction that we do. So for the project we were working on, the stage it was in then, we needed some concrete mix, and we needed sand to go in the concrete mix. So they actually did arrange for a big dump truck to come and just dump this huge pile of sand. Fortunately, construction site's over there about 100 yards, and the closest we can get is this pile of sand here. How do we move the sand in Haiti? Buckets. You put it in buckets, and you just keep handing them along a line the whole way down. Bucket after exhausting bucket. And you can get by with it so long as you're in the shade, and you get your regular break every half hour or so to get your water. But there were parts of our line that day that were not in the shade, and when it was your turn to step out into the sun, it just sucked it all out of you immediately. So you would pass the bucket for 3 minutes. You're like, I got to take a half-hour break, right? I got to get my water. But you didn't have water. All you had was these buckets, and these buckets aren't filled with water. They're filled with sand, which, did you ever try to drink sand? Oh, you better not, right? But we become desperate for water in that situation. Have you ever been there? We get desperate to drink water because water's one of the most necessary things for us in this world. Did you know that 50 to 60% of your body weight is water? And when we get in these ideas like, I'm going to lose weight, it'll be easy. All I have to do is stop drinking water and I'll lose 50% of my weight, right? Well, not so fast, because if you lose even 20% of your water, you're going to die. We get desperate for water. We pant after water. And as I thought about that this week, it kind of amazes me how sometimes when we need water, we don't drink water. Right? You've been, let's say it's summer, it's a hot summer day, you're at a picnic of some sort outside, and you've been moving around outside doing some activity, and you get desperate for water, right? You're panting for it, and your host says, well, here's the cooler. And opens the cooler, and there's some bottles of water there, and then some cans of soda, and maybe depending on where you're at, maybe some alcoholic beverages or something, right? What do you go for? So often we don't go for the water, do we? No, and this is what we did in Haiti. We would go out to the work sites and work all morning in the hot sun, and then we would just trudge back to the mission compound for lunch, knowing we get this hour for lunch, and then we're going to be back out doing it for 4 more hours. And we're desperate for water. But we get back, and they always have these ice-cold sodas waiting for us. They had Coca-Cola or 7-Up, and it was the tall, thin, tapered bottles we used to have here. You'd put the deposits down. That's what they'd have for us. And guess what we would attack? We'd attack that soda. Yeah! Even though we're desperate for the water. It's what we do. We choose something else that wasn't as good. And I want to talk to you about that today because I think this is a metaphor for our spiritual lives. How sometimes we are craving water, or we need water. We're desperate for water. We're desperate for God in our lives. And so often we'll choose something else. We'll pursue something else. We'll go after something else, right? And the psalmist that we looked at in today's passage show us, Jim, and this is how he starts the psalm. He says, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, O God. Now, these are somewhat familiar words to most of us because someone took these words and paraphrased them into a pretty popular praise song some number of years ago that we still sing here from time to time. So we know these words, but they're still fresh to me as I look at them, and I look at how the psalmist uses the word pants. Pants, not like pants that you wear, but you're panting after something, right? And he says, as the deer pants for water, God, that's my soul panting for you. You get this image of a deer just charging through the underbrush, maybe being pursued by a hunter or some sort of danger, and just running and just needing to get to a stream and just desperate to get to a stream to get a drink of water. That's the image. And the psalmist compares that image to himself and how desperate he is for God in his life. He's like, I pant after God. He's desperately seeking after God in his life, panting for God. And that's just like a wow moment for me, because when was the last time, think about your own life, when was the last time you were so desperate for God, you panted after God? That's huge. We don't do it very often. We're always out after something else. God says, here's my water, and we want to drink something else. It reminds me of, let's say we're going to run 5 miles. I can't run. Can anyone here run 5 miles? Chris, can you run 5 miles? Don't exercise with me. You'll be very disappointed, always pulling me after you, right? But like 5 miles, right? Let's say we're going to run 5 miles, right? And at the end of 5 miles, maybe we're thirsty. Maybe we're parched. Maybe we're desperate. Maybe we're panting for water, right? And we were there, and someone walks up to us. They see us. We're panting, right? And say, oh, you look so thirsty. Here, drink this. And they hand us a cup. And I love this. It illustrates this image, right? And we go to drink it. It's not water. It's ketchup, right? After running 5 miles, I don't care how much you love ketchup. You're not drinking that ketchup, are you? No, it's disgusting. You refuse to drink it even though you're so desperately thirsty. Why? Because you need water, right? And that's the feeling the psalmist has toward God right now. He's desperately panting after God, the water of God in his life, and nothing else will do. No ketchup's going to do. Everything else the world could have to offer for him right now, it's just like ketchup after a marathon. His soul thirsts for God. Jim, show us. So much so that he continues in verse 2 to say, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? He's begging, God, when can I meet with you? Right? And it's this desperate. It's like God's like the big man on campus, right? That all the girls are just like swarming around him, just wanting some time, right? Just maybe a date or just an afternoon, a couple minutes of your time, right? That's how it is. Forget about waiting for Sunday, or maybe not this Sunday, next Sunday, because I got stuff going on this Sunday. No, I'm not waiting. God, when can I meet with you? Please let me. And sometimes I think we read these Psalms and things in the Bible and we think, well, the person who wrote that at the time, they were just on a spiritual high. You know, they really love God a lot. Things must have been going really well for them right then. And that's why they can look to God like that, but not so fast. Because the psalmist talks about how the things of this world are just getting in the way. Things trying to keep him or entice him away from the living water of God. Show us, Jim, the first part of verse 3. He says, my tears have been my food day and night. Now, what does it mean when tears are your food day and night? You're in bad trouble. Yeah, there's stuff going on, right? Life's not good right now is what he's saying. I've cried. I've known disappointment. I've wept. I've known pain. I've sobbed. I've suffered. I have broken down in tears. And for some of us right now in your life, you can identify with being at a place in life, maybe now or at some other point in your life. You've been there. It's not a good place. And on top of that, Jim, please show us the second part of the verse. He says, men say to me all day long, where is your God? See, on top of all these troubles, I got people mocking me now for looking to God for my hope through it. And people are constantly trying to pull me away. He says, where's your God? Well, just come over here and go after this instead, because this God stuff isn't working for you. What's the psalmist saying? He says, the things of this world, they're constantly on me. They're constantly against me. Getting in the way of me worshiping God. Enticing me away. See, going to meet with God right now, it's not easy or convenient to do in my life. But he's still there saying, I'm panting after God. How can he be panting after God in all this? What's his answer? How does he fight past it? Well, he tells us. He says he remembers. He remembers some things. Jim, do you want to show us real quickly there? Just Psalm 42:4. In the next verse, he says, I remember how I used to go with the multitude, leading the procession to the house of God with shouts of joy and thanksgiving among the festive throng. What's he talking about here? He's talking about, in our context, he's talking about going to church. And he's just not going to church. He's excited about it. And he's out in front, he's leading the way, he's pulling other people there with him, he's full of thanksgiving and joy. See, he remembers that. He remembers times in his life when he was like that, meeting with God in joy, with all the other people at church. And that's his protection. When the ketchup of the world is out there, the other things that might try to get his attention away from God, or the things he might pursue that aren't necessarily God, that's his protection. That's what brings him away from the distractions of the world. That's what brings him back to panting, that desperation for God. That's what brings him back to that place where he's begging, God, when can I meet with you? He remembers. He remembers the joyful worship of God with others in the congregation, and that brings him back. And that's one of the reasons it's so important for us to continue to be connected into our local congregations, ladies and gentlemen. That's one of the reasons we come to church is so important. It's not just something we do because, well, we have to, or feel guilty if we don't have to. Mom and dad or our kids might say something to us if we don't. It's a time of precious worship with others that will draw us back to our thirst for God when the things of this world try to pull us away. So if today you've been feeling the world pulling you away from your desperation for God, maybe something you need to do is redouble your efforts and your attitude toward worship time together with us here. What's my attitude when I come to worship? Am I out in that festive throng, or am I just kind of plodding along into the building? Because here's the thing, the psalmist recognizes that at those times when he's not panting after God, when he's pursuing other things, he's got his eyes on other things, it's not caused by the world putting those obstacles in his way. It's not the world's fault. It's caused by something inside of him. It's his fault. Jim, please show us verse 5. He says, "Why are you downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me?" I added the italics there. See, the world is coming against him and maybe giving him ketchup to take him away from the water of God, right? But his distance from God, that life-giving water, it's not the world's fault. It's his. He says here, the problem is in me, my soul, within me. And so even though he's thirsty for something in his life, he becomes that thirsty idiot who ignores the fountain at the center of the room. He ignores the living water of God to go out and pursue other things. He allows the problems of the world to carry him away from his pursuit of God. He allows the trappings of the world to entice him away from seeking the fountain of life, that is God. Because inside, he has decided, I'm no longer going to pant after God. I'm no longer going to be desperate for God in my life. I'm going to be desperate for all sorts of other things. And sure, maybe he sometimes joins the throng heading to worship. But he's no longer out in front leading the charge. And he's no longer shouting with joy and thanksgiving. He's just kind of going along. Because inside him, he decides he's no longer going to pant after God. He's going to be desperate for other things. He's going to ignore the thing that gives him life, the living water. Instead, he's going to crawl after everything else. He's going to go after the cups of ketchup. And he will die in that. Maybe physically, but certainly spiritually. Because without God, there is no fruit. There is no life. And it's not the fault of the world. That's a decision that comes from within inside in us. My question for you today is, how familiar are you with this idea of panting after God? When was the last time you were panting after God in life? You were so desperate for God, you went after him. Are you every day desperate for God in your life? When you wake up and it's Sunday morning, it's church day. Are you there leading the festive throng to worship? Or at best, you're just kind of going because you're supposed to. Or maybe other things entice you away. You go and you drink your ketchup for the day, right? When you wake up and it's not Sunday, which is 6 out of 7 days a week, it's not church day. Are you crying out, when can I go and meet with God the way the psalmist was? God, when can I meet with you? This is not church day. How can I meet with you today, God? Or do you just say, okay, well, since it's not church, I'll just be about all these other things, the cups of ketchup that the world is offering me. Every day, God desires to pour his life-giving water, his presence into our lives. But if we're honest, man, if I'm honest, can we say that most days we're not looking to that? We're not panting after God? And it's not the world's fault. It's not somebody else's fault or something else's fault, where if he did this or she hadn't done that, or if this hadn't happened, then no. See, it's easier to point fingers at other things rather than to look inside ourselves. But as the psalmist reveals to us, it's our fault. It comes from within inside us. We make that decision. See, we ignore the life-giving stream right next to us to pursue other things. We're drinking the ketchup at the end of the marathon. It's like we're eating cinnamon, ladies and gentlemen. Have you ever heard of the cinnamon challenge? Anyone here ever heard of this? Don't do this. It's not recommended. You get a big spoonful of cinnamon, and you just eat it, and you try to swallow it. Except for it's near impossible, because cinnamon's dry to begin with. It's so dry that it sucks all the rest of the moisture right out of your mouth. And so you try to swallow, but you can't, because it's choking you. It's choking you. People have actually died trying this, so don't try it. You see, rather than the pure water of God, we're drinking, we're eating the cinnamon that the world offers us, ladies and gentlemen. And it just chokes us. And we do it willingly. Maybe because God has already become so secondary in our lives that we don't even know the difference anymore between the life that God gives, his life-giving water, and the counterfeit life that the world promises but can never deliver us. And so we settle for that cup of ketchup, all those other things we pursue in life. Well, we settle for that big tablespoonful of cinnamon, and it just chokes us. I tell you right now, if you're not desperately panting after God's presence in your life, then you can be helped today by the psalmist. We look at the psalmist, and we can learn from him. What does he teach us? He teaches us to remember. You know, search your life and remember that time, maybe that very day, maybe that very moment when you knew that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, into this world to die for you, to pay the penalty for your sins, to give you the promise of eternal life with God in heaven, to set you free. Remember those moments in your life that overflowed with joy because you were saved. You're saved by grace through faith. God saved you, and that has just given you so much joy. Remember those days when you were at the head of the line going off to worship, shouting with joy and thanksgiving, just bringing everybody else along. Listen to what my God's done for me. Not just joining with others with excitement, but leading others to worship God. Remember those times, because most of us have been there at one point or other in our lives. And as you remember, let that be the avenue to you seeking God through the garbage of the world that it just puts in front of us, beyond the tears that have been your only food day in and day out. Remember that you can follow that back to your desperation for God. Because the truth is, for some of you right now, life's good, right? You know, home's good, family's good, work's good, you go to school, school's good, right? Perfect. If life's good right now, I want to encourage you, this should be the time you should be panting after God. And if you're not panting after God, why aren't you panting after him in your life right now when life is good? Because you're not like the psalmist who is panting after God, the psalmist who's saying the world's pushing me down and away from God. See, you don't have that excuse. Why aren't you pursuing God with everything you've got? You need to do it now. You need to thirst and pant after God and be desperate for him and pursue him, because one day life's not going to be so kind. And the world's going to come against you. And people will do and say things to entice you away from God, or to cause doubt within you, to pull you away from the life-giving water of God in your life. And you might find yourself enticed and pulled away by these things, and you're drinking the ketchup. And what are you going to do then to get back to God? Because if when things are good, you're not panting after God with desperation in your life, you're not making memories that you can remember later that bring you back to that desperation for God. you'll be lost, and you'll be left to pant after only things you cannot be saved by. So wherever you are today, we need to be there, desperately panting after God, seeking after God. How can I know you more, God? How can I love you more? How can I serve you more? And there's a lot of cinnamon eating in the Church of Jesus Christ in the United States right now. We settle for a lot of lesser things in our lives rather than the pure, life-giving water of God. Many of us have forgotten our first love, Jesus Christ. We no longer desire him. We no longer pant after him in every corner of our lives. And our lives have become parched because of it. They're meaningless. Drink more and more ketchup, right? We sometimes see it in the lack of enthusiasm in the United States of people joining in the procession to come worship God. We see it in the lack of joy and thanksgiving among the festive throng of believers in the United States. Instead, because we're pursuing everything else, we're drinking everything else, tears become our food day and night. It's our cinnamon. There's only one way out of it. We remember. We do what the psalmist says. We remember the joy found and what our Lord Jesus Christ has done for us. And we pant after God the way the deer pants for that stream of water. See, coming to church regularly or semi-regularly, it's not enough. Meeting with God once in a while, not enough. We're desperate for him. What's the cinnamon in your life? What are you desperate for instead of that life-giving water from God? What do you put ahead of coming before God in worship? What things in life are you substituting or settling for rather than joining God's people with excitement as we meet in worship? See, here's what it comes down to. We know the difference. We know the difference between life-giving water and cinnamon that'll strangle us. We know the difference between life and God and all those other things we can pursue that take us away from that life. It comes down to us making the choice. What are we going to be desperate for? As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, O God. Let that be you today. Let's pray.